Before I launch into a lecture, which will be the next file on Chapter 10 itself and the early days of the Republic, I wanted to just take a quick moment. We haven't really done a great deal in the way of things like women's history to this point. There is some in your books, which I hope you have taken the time to absorb, but I thought I'd make mention of this one particular figure, and really a particular document which has become rather famous because it's arguably it's the first document of the women's equality, women's liberation movement in the United States of America. So the woman you're looking at is Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams was the wife of John Adams. And first of all, you should know the Adams family was a prominent and important family in Massachusetts. Now, obviously, of course, you know John Adams from the Declaration of Independence and so on and so forth. But don't forget, Samuel Adams was his cousin, and there were Adamses, all over Massachusetts. She was related to the Quincy's. The Quincy's were another important, prominent family in Massachusetts, and she was actually the cousin of John Hancock's wife. So you see that it was a Massachusetts politics, New England politics was a narrow circle in society, and this is the world that Abigail comes from. And she was a hell of a woman in a time when colonial women were more or less expected to take care of the kids, take care of the house. Even if you were a wealthy woman from a prominent family, your job was to manage the household, and your husband did the political work. Abigail was a very intelligent, very forward-thinking woman, and it's to his credit that John Adams, who was notoriously short of temper and stubborn, valued her opinion so much. He just didn't dismiss her and, oh, shut up, woman, get back in the kitchen. They were partners in many ways in political thought. We should remember Abigail for nothing else. John Adams was George Washington's vice president. So she was the wife of the first vice president and the wife of the second president, because John Adams would succeed George Washington as president. So it has been famously said she was the first second lady and the second first lady of the United States. She and John had a remarkable correspondence. One of the things we miss in our current day of cell phones and text messaging, nobody writes letters anymore. And if you look back in this period, the 1700s and the 1800s, just the correspondence, the letters between friends, between colleagues, and between spouses are so rich and wonderful and give you such insight. And one of the differences, I'm off on a bit of a tangent here, between letters and texting is you get to reflect. You receive a letter, she would receive a letter from John. She'd have time to read it and think about it, meditate on it a bit, even if just for a few hours, before she sat down and picked up a pen and thought carefully as she wrote a letter back to him. And then she would send it to him, and they would exchange letters back and forth. The correspondence of this period is really just wonderful to read between all of these people. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson famously carried on correspondence, and I mean, just when you read their letters, you're listening to a conversation between the two greatest minds of the American Revolutionary period. When you read the correspondence between John and Abigail, and there's a lot of it, you get to participate in a sort of intellectual conversation that John has with himself, bouncing it off of her and her challenging him along the way. And you also enter into their relationship. you know, they really were a very warm couple. You know, Thomas Jefferson is sometimes portrayed as the great lover among the uh, among the founders of America. You know, Benjamin Franklin was the real ladies' man who loved to chase the girls. Jefferson was madly in love with his wife. John Adams is seen as sort of the fiery statesman. But when you read his letters to his wife, boy, did they have a deep and close love and a respect for each other. Okay, so I bring all of this up because I know we've already done the Revolution. We're getting into early America, the Bill of Rights, and all that. So it's time to bring up a famous letter, a famous exchange of letters between her and John, which took place just before the Declaration of Independence was written. And I'm pulling out quotes from these famous letters here. I will be posting these in a document online so that you can look at them yourself and think about them a bit. I urge you, if you have any interest in this stuff, Google up these letters. Take a couple of lines from one of these letters and just throw it into Google, and the correspondence will come up. And read the whole letter. I'm pulling out the relevant passages, but as you go through their letters, there's all sorts of little asides. She writes to John asking him to get needles, which making needles is actually a difficult art, and they were hard to get your hands on during the Revolution. So she writes to him asking him for needles, and he writes back to her asking her if she can get the ladies in Massachusetts to make gunpowder. They would have mixed this up in their kitchens. And, family issues, and you get a really rich picture of these people's lives. But I'm just pulling out the relevant passages to make a specific point to you folks. Okay, so this is a famous letter that she wrote dated March 31st, 1776. And realize that. March 31st, 1776. So we have April, we have May. We are 2 months before Richard Henry Lee's initial movement of the Resolution for Independence, and 3 months before the Declaration. And Abigail writes to John. And again, notice these were not, the women of the colonies were not necessarily just ignorant housewives. She keeps up on the politics. She reads all those newspapers and all those pamphlets. She knows exactly what her husband's up to. So she writes to him here, I long to hear that you have declared an independency. So she's already, urging her husband to go for independence from Britain. And by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. That phrase, remember the ladies, has become famous. If you throw into Google, remember the ladies, Abigail Adams, you'll see essays written about this particular letter. So she's already, think about that. She's the one who's thinking way ahead. March of 1776, she not only has the United States independent, but she's already thinking about, and when you set up the new government for this new United States, here are the laws I want you to make. Woof. Okay, so what does she say? Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Ah. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion, and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. This is an interesting letter. This is a letter from a husband to a wife who really care about each other. So don't read anger here, or should I say straight up anger. Abigail's being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit humorous. She's not about to lead women carrying muskets onto the field in Lexington to fight the men, but she's making a point, and she is being pretty forceful. That your sex are naturally tyrannical is a truth so thoroughly established as to admit of no dispute. But such of you as wish to be happy willingly give up the harsh tide of master for the more tender and endearing one of friend. So, what's she saying? Men are naturally tyrants and brutes, but the wise ones give up being a master over their wives and seek to be a friend. You can see already what their relationship must have been like. Why then not put it out of the power of the vicious and the lawless to use us with cruelty and indignity, with impunity? Men of sense in all ages abhor those customs which treat us only as the servants of your sex. Regard us then as being placed by Providence under your protection, and in imitation of the Supreme Being, make use of that power only for our happiness. So I can tell you this: Abigail was an advocate for rights for women under the law. The colonies, reflecting European prejudices, had restrictions on women's ability to own property. They weren't completely cut out, but they certainly didn't have the same standing in court that a man would. She was an early advocate of giving women equality in business, equality in property ownership, and all that sort of thing. So what she's saying here is, hey, when you start this new nation, let's put aside all of those old-fashioned ways where men are master over women. Don't forget the ladies. Remember the ladies. Restrain men's natural brutishness toward women, men's natural inclination to lord it over women. And let's make sure that you make laws that protect women. Very forward thinking. April 14th, so 2 weeks later, John writes to Abigail, and 2 weeks, he wasn't really delaying. Don't forget, it would have taken a few days for the letter to get from Massachusetts to Philadelphia, where he is. He's got to sit down and write back to her, so he wasn't ignoring her for 2 weeks. Okay, so John writes back to Abigail in part. He's written the first part of the letter is about what's going on and so on. As to your extraordinary code of laws, I cannot but laugh. We have been told that our struggle has loosened the bonds of government everywhere, that children and apprentices were disobedient, that schools and colleges were grown turbulent, that Indians slighted their guardians, and Negroes grew insolent to their masters. But your letter was the first intimation that another tribe, more numerous and powerful than all the rest, were grown discontented. This is rather too coarse a compliment, but you are so saucy I won't blot it out. Again, this is a very loving husband writing to his wife and making a serious point, but he's putting a little humor in here. And what's he saying? This rebellion of the Americans against the British government people were already complaining, oh my God, you're letting loose this demon of rebellion. And so, children are talking back to their parents now, and students in school are talking back to their teachers, and Indians are talking back to the government agents sent over them, etc. And now we hear you women are going to be talking back to your husbands, more numerous and powerful than all the rest, because you make up half the population, right? The saucy there is kind of spirited. What would we say? Bold, irreverent. Little rebellious. It's a bit. He's saying it's a compliment. It's a little bit of a coarse compliment, but hey, you're a spirited girl. You'll get it. So he's not being dismissive of her. I mean, they're having a little bit of fun with each other, but he's not being dismissive. Okay. Depend on it. We know better than to repeal our masculine systems. Although they are in full force, they are a little more than theory. We dare not exert our power in its full latitude. We are obliged to go fair and softly, and in practice, we are the subjects. So what's he saying? He again, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, it's a little bit jokey, but there's truth that he's expressing underneath it. We men, we're a little scared of giving you ladies the power because you'll take over. But we don't want to get you too pissed off, so we dare not exert our power in its full latitude because we know we're really the subjects. We have only the name of masters, and rather than give up this, which would completely subject us to the despotism of the petticoat, I hope General Washington and all our brave heroes would fight. So he's saying, yeah, you're right, Abigail, we're the masters, but we're masters in name only. And we're a little afraid to give up that because you women, you really will take over. Okay, so then a couple of weeks later, Abigail writes back to John. I cannot say that I think you are very generous to the ladies, for whilst you are proclaiming peace and goodwill to men, emancipating all nations, you insist upon retaining an absolute power over wives. So you're busy freeing everybody else except your wives. But you must remember that arbitrary power is like most other things which are very hard, very liable to be broken. So arbitrary power is very hard, liable to be broken, brittle, Yeah, it's hard, but it breaks easily. And notwithstanding all your wise laws and maxims, we have it in our power not only to free ourselves, but to subdue our masters, and without violence, throw both your natural and legal authority at our feet. If we really wanted to, we women, we could put you under our feet. Once again, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, it's a little bit jokey, but there's a real truth under here. And not only a truth, but you see the quality of mind Abigail had, huh? She's a clever, profound thinking and progressive thinking woman. This is no dumb cluck. She's got some real thoughts about society. Okay, so this correspondence between them, again, famously the Remember the Ladies letter. What do you have to remember about this document? Because it's quite possible that there will be reference to this on the AP exam in some form. And it's a good thing to have in your pocket to make reference to if there's a relevant essay question that comes about. Remember, Abigail's living in a world in which women had little legal identity apart from their husbands. You were defined by your relationship to the man in your life. And therefore, for instance, and this was true actually until the 20th century, women could not serve on juries. That was men. Women could not vote, of course. Women could not hold political office. In some places, women were restricted from the property they could own and so on. And yet here's Abigail, who clearly is the intellectual equal of any man who was in the Continental Congress. Here you have the first really advocacy for greater rights for women. And, the deeper point here is that as the Republican, small r, revolution is unfolding, you can see that the basic idea of the revolution is beginning to spread philosophically. This is not, in the long run, there may be some people at the time, 1776, who are thinking of this as a change of government and an economic issue, but there are people, like some women, who are thinking about this about a more profound philosophical change for society, an equality between all people, including women. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a short little point there, key thing to have in your pocket.